Welcome to Crop Talk, brought to you by Innovative Ag Services, and this is our Field Scouting Special. Each week from March through October, our agronomy team shares timely, boots-on-the-ground updates from across the IAS geography, so you can make confident decisions as the seasons change. Today, you'll hear a quick regional update from our IAS agronomists, including what we're seeing in the fields right now, what to keep an eye on next, and a few practical scouting reminders you can put to work this week. I'm your host, Nicholas Giesman. Let's kick things off by sending it over to our Southwest region, where Nick will give you an update and a little safety talk.
Thanks, Nicholas. This is Nick Thompson from the Southwest, covering Story County, Hardin County, and Hamilton County. For our safety update this week, it's going to be based mainly around smart boxes and the insecticides inside of them. Make sure when you're calibrating your smart boxes that you always wear a glove and mask, as even the dust from these products can be highly effective on your lungs. Wash your hands thoroughly and avoid touching your face at all times while you're dealing with these products, as they are highly toxic and highly dangerous. For our scouting update in this region, we're looking around 48 degrees for soil temps. As we go further north, we're starting to see a little bit of a temperature drop off, but no more than about 2 degrees. Obviously, it's been raining a lot. It's very wet out here, and I'd be very careful not to push anything and get into the fields too quickly. Now's a great time for you to be developing your plans for planting and figuring out what hybrids are going in which field. As you probably talked about that in the wintertime, it's still very relevant as we get here to spring. Next, I will pass it over to Owen in our Northwest region.
Hey guys, this is Owen Heatland at the Cleves location, covering Hardin, Franklin, Grundy, and Butler County. Kind of to go off what Nick said, it is very wet. We received between 4 and 4.5 inches of rain here last Thursday, Friday, and maybe a little bit Saturday. So we're kind of at a standstill. Ammonia is 80 to 90% done. Dry fertilizer is in that same area. Looks like we're going to be wet through this week and maybe in the next week with some cooler temperatures. So making sure that we've got equipment ready, and then like Nick said, making sure we've got a planting plan ready as far as what seed goes in what fields, and then go so far as to look at cold germ and germ tests on different numbers and emergence tests, and make sure that we're not pushing things too hard and causing compaction, wet, cold germ issues the rest of the year. With that, I will kick it over to Melissa in the Northeast region.
Thank you, Owen. My name is Melissa Schumann, and I am out of the Elkader office covering the northeast corner of Iowa, specifically Clayton and Fayette counties here. Big watch out for our area is know your individual field conditions. With the widespread rain, we saw a range of anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain. So even just across the fence line, field conditions have quite a variance of wetness to them. So be sure you're checking your fields for washouts prior to planting to avoid any mishaps once we are able to get out into the field, and check that all tile outlets are draining properly. Here we are utilizing the rainy days to organize seed and take inventory. Make sure you as the producer have enough seed and enough of the right seed for your operation in case you changed any acres over. Now is a good time to get that organized, and if you need to procure any more additional seed, check with your local agronomist to make sure you've got that all locked in and ready to go. As always, remember, planning ahead can help ensure the best possible outcome as we get closer to that insurance plant date. Make sure you have proper seedbed preparation and the field conditions are ready for planting to help avoid timely and costly situations in the future for this year. And with that, I'm going to kick it down to the Southeast region.
Thank you very much, Melissa. This is Nicholas Giesman. I am covering Jackson and Dubuque County over here in the Southeast. About like everybody else, we had about 2 to 3 inches of rain, kind of depending on where you were, maybe a little less. We are looking today to spots to get back in the field where it's sandier. Got a few guys talking about pulling some ammonia. Few and far in between, as most of the ground is still fairly wet. I'm looking at preparing for when we do get another run, as we're only about 60% done with ammonia and 70% done with dry. We're looking at when are we going to get in the field. So everybody's kind of preparing, making sure your equipment's ready, making sure you got seed on hand, chemicals on hand to start doing some burn downs here when it gets fit. Otherwise, we're waiting for this Mother Nature to get some sun, dry out the fields, and get back in there. Some big watch outs for this time of year. We're going to talk soil temp and planting emergence. We kind of hit on that a little bit with different seeds and having a cold emergence score and germination. But I'm going to send it over to Owen, who's going to give us a little more in-depth on when to look for planting, what temperature, and what really comes to it when you're picking your seed and why it matters.
So the biggest thing that we want to start talking about is soil temps of 50 degrees. We always want to look to start when the soil temp is 50 and rising. We don't really ever want to plant when we see 50 and falling. And once we see that, we're good to go. But the biggest issue then is looking at a future forecast. And as we get to a point where we're going to get rain, is that rain going to warm or cool the soil? And if it does cool the soil, we need to stop planting before we get to that point, because that will cause what is called inhibitional chilling. And that will cause our germination to struggle or even grow down and then grow back up. So the biggest thing is just watching the forecast, looking at your soil temp, and then picking seed that will handle that situation better. Decide what seed is best to start and what seed you would use later on in the season as your planting progresses. And any of your agronomists would be more than happy to help you with that.
Oh, and I'd like to jump in here and ask a quick question. If this rain keeps coming and we don't see a consistent dry break, what impacts on your crop could you have if you go out there and start planting when it's too wet out?
That's a very good question, Nick. So the first thing is, unfortunately, the best option is to be patient, which is hard for everybody. If a guy plants too wet, you can see sidewall compaction or sidewall smearing, cloudiness from working the ground when it's too wet. Eventually, a long time from now, we would start to switch hybrids maybe to an earlier number, but we've got a month and a half before, that decision needs to be made. So like I said, the biggest thing right now is just to be patient and look for good soil conditions and warming temps more so than anything else.
Thank you very much for that, Owen. That's some great insight and some very valuable knowledge to kick off your season on the right note. That's all for this week's Crop Talk by IAS. Thanks for tuning in. If any of our listeners have questions, feel free to email them to croptalk@innovativeag.com. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss next week's update. And if you know a fellow grower who'd value a quick field snapshot, share this episode with them. For more agronomy resources and to connect with your local IAS team, visit innovativeag.com and follow Innovative Ag Services on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We'll catch you next week on Crop Talk.